sun beat in the afternoon heat off the silver factory walls, its light nearly brutal, taunting the suffering that marked the earth below. A little rag doll, its arm twisted, sat on the dirty pavement, its face smeared with dirt. It had seen silently the whirlwind of turmoil that had blown up just moments before. Only a few feet away, a young woman struggled to her feet. Her blonde hair was matted, her lips split, and one cheek already bruised to a deep purple. Next to her was a little girl, no older than 6 years old, shaking, holding the battered doll to her chest. Her tear-filled eyes flicked between her battered mother and the road in front of her, the road where the men who had attacked them had just vanished, laughing into the distance. If you feel the values of kindness, justice, and defending those who cannot fight by themselves, then kindly like, comment, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories. Your support assists us in keeping inspiring, heart-touching stories alive, stories that show kindness can still transform lives. Her name was Clara, a young widow keeping her breakable world together with nothing but love and resolve. She spent her days toiling endless hours at Weldon Auto Components, just enough to barely afford rent or groceries for her daughter, Hazel. And yet, Clara never grumbled, never once. Each morning, she'd knot Hazel's yellow ribbons and whisper, shaking with a smile, "Someday, sweetheart, things will get better." And Hazel had believed her, because when you're 6, you believe every promise your mother gives, even when the truth isn't visible in her eyes. But that afternoon, all changed. The doll cracked, and so did something deep within both of them. Clara had learned that the factory manager and his team had been shortchanging her for months, taking advantage of her desperation. When she finally mustered up the courage to challenge them, they laughed at her face. When she pleaded, one of them pushed her against the cold concrete wall, and when little Hazel came running, her doll in her arms and crying for them to get away, one of the men snatched the toy from her small fingers, pulled off its arm, and hurled it into the ground. And then they departed, leaving a bruised mother, weeping child, and the shattered quiet of injustice. Clara strained to be tough. She wiped the blood off her lip, managing a smile as she whispered, "It's okay, babe. Mommy's fine." Her voice, however, shook, revealing the secret her heart could not keep. Hazel did not reply. She hugged her shattered doll closer, crying silently onto the sidewalk. And just when it seemed like all was lost, the earth started to shake with a far-off rumble. Engines. The noise grew louder, deeper, until it filled the street like thunder booming through the city. Hazel spun around. 5 bikers rode up at the end of the road, their chrome Harleys sparkling in the sunlight. Their black vests had a red-winged skull emblazoned on them, the Hells Angels logo. They slowed to a stop. The leader, a rugged man with salt and pepper hair and tattoos coiling down his arms, stepped off his bike. His presence was calm but commanding, someone who didn't need to speak to be respected. His vest read RL Chills. He glanced around the scene, the trembling mother, the little girl with her broken toy, the fresh bruise on Clara's cheek, and his jaw tightened. Then, without a word, he dropped down to Hazel's eye level. His deep, gravelly voice grew softer as he asked soft, "Who did this to you?" Hazel hesitated, then slowly lifted her tiny hand and pointed toward the factory. Behind the leader, the other motorcyclists exchanged a look, that wordless type of stare men communicate when words aren't required. It was one that implied justice will prevail. The leader stood up, his shadow elongating far down on the dusty ground, and nodded once. That was all it required. In one action, the 5 men faced the gates of the factory, engines revved to life, their noise thundering through the air, half thunder, half reckoning. Clara's voice broke on a cry of, "Wait! Please don't do this!" But they were already disappearing, a flash of chrome and black leather hurtling towards the factory yard. Inside, the men who just minutes before had laughed were immobile. The workers halted their tasks and stood agog as the group of bikers came rolling in, their engines purring low and steady, like growling monsters. The first to step off his bike was the leader. His chunky boots clomped on the pavement as he strode directly to the factory manager. The man attempted to stand up straight, mustering a scowl, but it was short-lived. Not when he caught sight of the flames smouldering behind the biker's cold, unwavering gaze. Nobody knows for sure what was said that afternoon, but the yelling could be heard on the street. Then silence, thick, definite, the kind of silence that leaves you knowing everything is different. When the bikers rode back out through the gates at last, the factory floor lay quiet. The men who had beaten Clara didn't laugh again that day. Hazel held onto her mother's hand tightly as the roar of engines receded once more, coming back full circle. The leader pulled up next to them, the sunlight dancing off the handlebars. Grinning, he pulled his hand out of his vest pocket and produced a new doll, fresh, spotless, its blue dress fluttering softly in the wind. He handed it to Hazel. She stared at it through her tears, too overwhelmed to speak. Then, without saying a word, the man reached into his wallet and pulled out a thick envelope stuffed with cash. He placed it gently in Clara's trembling hands. She shook her head, trying to refuse, but he simply gave a small nod, a silent message that said, "You've suffered enough." The bikers started to ride off, but the leader stopped once more. He gazed down at Hazel, and the little girl, still holding her new doll, flashed a tiny, courageous smile. And then, with the deafening sound of engines, they vanished. 5 men, whom the world used to refer to as dangerous, had just shown everyone what true strength is. The factory gates remained closed the next morning. The news traveled fast. The management resigned. Nobody ever laid eyes on those men again. That night, Clara went home with her head held high for the first time in years. Hazel skipped along beside her, her new doll glinting in the light. It was not just a toy that had been retrieved that day. It was faith. If this story has warmed your heart, please do take the time to like, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Story. Each story we share is a reminder that kindness can be brought by the most unlikely of heroes. Before you leave, tell us in the comments, would you have done what the bikers did? Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They wear leather and ride straight into the storm.